I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer at Gold Derby, and I'm joined today by Sheila Atim, who stars as Mabel on Barry Jenkins' 10-episode limited series, The Underground Railroad, which is based on Colson Whitehead's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel of the same name. So, Sheila, how does Barry Jenkins' set and working environment compare to others you have been on and worked in your career?
How does it compare? I mean, I haven't done lots of screen work. So working on the Underground Railroad was one of the first screen things that I've done. But he set a very high bar because it was such a wonderful experience, and I wasn't actually on set that much. I was in Georgia for quite a while, but a lot of the time was kind of, waiting because my shooting days were spread out. But the actual shooting days for the Mabel episode were quite close together, and that was maybe about a week, maybe 6 days in total. Yeah, so it was very, very quick. So I had a slightly more removed experience because my storyline is kind of isolated in a sense, as is my presence in the show. But nonetheless, I still felt so welcomed and included and safe. He runs his sets in such a collaborative way, and in a way that really makes people feel like they are empowered, but also they feel led. I did feel like at any point, if I was struggling or if I was unsure, that there would be a leader who I could go to. And there were counselors on set, and we were warned about how realistic the set would feel, the plantation set. So there was just a huge amount of care and attention given to the people that were working on the project, as well as a lot of trust creatively. So yeah, he set a very high bar.
Well, that's great. And you already mentioned that you haven't done that much screen work, but you do have an extensive background in theater. You made your professional acting debut in 2013's The Lightning Child and won an Olivier Award for Girl from the North Country in 2018. A lot of actors who start in theater say they could not have ventured into film and television had they not had that prior experience of acting on stage. Would you say that was also the case for you?
I think probably, yeah. I mean, there's kind of two parts to that. There's me as an actor and my craft, and then there's the exposure side, I guess. So I didn't really get many screen auditions. I could count on one hand how many screen auditions I had within the first 5 years of doing theatre. But that didn't bother me because I was very much a theatrical, I was a theatrical child and always did the school shows and did A-level drama. And so theatre was very much within my wheelhouse and something that I had a lot more experience in anyway. And then when I was going to a class, an arts college, that was taught by Che Walker, who wrote The Lightning Child.
Oh,
That's how I ended
right.
up being in it. So it felt like a very natural progression for me. And because I didn't go to a sort of formal drama school and do 3 years of training, I did so much learning on the job. But even if you do go to drama school, you're still doing a lot of learning on the job, right? It's with any job, experience is key. So yeah, I feel like going to theatre was like school as well, working in theatre. And it meant that when I kind of started doing more screen work, there was a grounding there that was really helpful. That's not to say that it doesn't work the other way around, but I know it's quite common this way around. And there was still a whole new set of skills to learn once you step on set, because it is a different medium and it's a kind of different ball game in a sense. But essentially, the attention to detail that you get when you're working in theatre, the time you get for rehearsal, the time you get for discussion, the time you get to experiment and play, really sets you up for screen environments where you have less of that time, and it's more about we're on set and we're figuring it out as we go. So yeah, I'm kind of glad that I did it that way around.
And how was it diving into something like the Underground Railroad then, in which so much of the emotion is in fact not conveyed through dialogue? Or is this something you don't consider, even think about when you're actually approaching the material?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Barry was very helpful in obviously being the outside eye, and so helping convey how much or how little we needed to show in that sense when it wasn't through dialogue, because that's kind of hard to gauge. And I think with theatre, the assumption is that you always have to go big, right? Because there's more people and you're in a live space where there's people right at the back, which isn't necessarily true, but it is true that you have to have an awareness. So you're probably turning your body out a bit more and maybe demonstrating things a little bit more. But essentially it's the same. And I think, whenever I speak to kind of up and coming actors and they're like, give me some advice about how to make the difference between screen and theatre, I say it's essentially the same. There's just some tweaks you have to make to technique to make sure that it translates for that medium. But in terms of what you're doing as an actor, when it comes to thinking about your character, thinking about the story, trying to, make sure you are conveying whatever it is you want to convey, that is the same. That process is the same. So it's more about, dialing it up or down depending on where you are and what the angle is and whether there's a light on you or not, all those things. Yeah, and I mean, there's it's sparse when it comes to dialogue, but there's a lot of life, there's a lot of inner life in those pauses and in those silences. So they're active, and you could feel that from the script as well before even trying to have a go. I never felt like I had to work out what I was doing in a pause. It was kind of, it was all there and given to me for me to access.
That's very insightful. And when I spoke to your co-star Tusu Mbedu 2 weeks ago, she revealed that she had to practically unlearn everything she knew about the enslaved body in America when preparing for this role and trying to get to the truth. So I'm curious as to what your preparation process looked like, especially given that Mabel's chapter in the book, keeping in style with the rest of the book, is rather short. But I feel like there is some fleshing out that Barry really did do. So how did you prepare for this role after signing on to the project? And what were some of the conversations you and Barry had?
Yeah, I mean, I read the book, obviously. And then, because the script for Mabel hadn't been written yet in its entirety. So I read the book. And then once I received the scripts, I had a look through the scripts, and Barry had also written me a letter explaining, kind of what he wanted Mabel to be, or at least what he wanted that part of the story to explore, is probably a more accurate way of saying it. So that was great, because for me it was broad enough to go in there completely, fresh, and without any preconception of what I had to do, but with some guidance. And I kept my preparation quite light. I looked into midwifery during that period of time, to understand what it meant to be a midwife on a plantation and also be an enslaved person. Which was very interesting, because that then had ramifications for Mabel's status, which you kind of see her grappling with throughout the episode. She does have the ear of the overseers, and because she's kind of a medical professional, as it were, but she's still an enslaved person. So how does she dance that line, and how much power does she really have? So that was the thing that I focused on, and I did also focus on the accent, and I listened to some recordings, and there was a dialect coach. But for me, the main thing was just trying to react to everything that was given to me. My wonderful co-stars, who were all so brilliant. The set design, which was so real, the costume, which was so real. And I did have an understanding of the historical background of that time. Not saying I'm expert by any means, but it wasn't completely alien to me. So yeah, but for me, most of my projects, I try and get as much as I can from the text, and then I sort of supplement with background if I need to, rather than doing lots of background and then going in with the text. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think it depends from project to project, and obviously Tuso had so much to carry in the series that it makes complete sense that she had to do such a body of work in order to access, whereas I kind of come in for a much briefer segment. So yeah, that's what I did. I kept it light.
Right. And Mabel really is a compassionate person who is skilled at navigating the incredibly fraught social dynamics of the Randall plantation, and uses that skill to help her fellow slaves whenever she can, including Polly, which we really get to see in the final episode. Could you talk me through the complexity of this friendship slash relationship with Polly that is so beautifully highlighted in that final episode?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Mabel kind of becomes a mother to everyone on the plantation, including her own daughter,
Mhm.
which is why it's the kind of sad irony of her disappearance is that the story is that she abandoned her child when actually she was an incredibly maternal figure, and it's more complex than that, as you find out
Yeah.
in that episode. But I think with Polly, obviously they're friends, and she does have to take on a caregiver role because she is a midwife. And she is trying so hard to have the foresight to protect Polly from what it means to be somebody who's lost a child. But there is just a lack of compassion
Yeah.
from the surrounding parties. So Mabel's ability to mitigate that is really diminished, and she has to then try and find as many ways as she can to work around that. Okay, well, if we're not allowed to do this, then maybe we can do this and still keep it within the bounds of something that's going to be okay. And and it just it's just incredibly complicated because Polly's not just a patient, she's a friend as well. And she's a fellow woman and somebody who's in need, and somebody who is suffering. But Mabel is also suffering under the same
Yeah.
circumstances. So it's a very kind of the dissonance, I think, that happens for Mabel is incredibly, the strain of that must be so awful, because as I said earlier, you do have a degree of influence, I think I'll call it, not power as such, but
Mhm.
influence. But it's very conditional. It's very conditional, and it's sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. It's also very fickle. Overseer might just decide one day to listen to you and then decide to not.
Mhm.
um yeah, it's a really, in the moments I think where you do get to see the tenderness between them and flickers of joy, it's really beautiful. It really stands out.
And then after Polly kills the two children and then herself, as you alluded to already, Mabel flees into the swamp. And what exactly is going through her head in that very moment when she walks away? Why does she initially attempt to leave?
Yeah, we grappled with this on set, because I think that was kind of the crux of Mabel's story, and in an essence, the Cora's story, because
Yes.
Mabel's disappearance is such a driving factor for Cora through her journey. Um, and so we really wanted to make sure that we got that right, and that it didn't just feel like a mother abandoned their kid, like it was like a sort of cursory thought. We didn't want it to be as simplistic as that. And so when we were filming the episode, for the most part actually we filmed relatively in sequence, which was nice, but
Oh, okay.
there were obviously, as always with filming, moments when you film out of sequence. So we were making sure we were tracking Mabel's journey throughout the episode, because quite a lot happens in a short space of time. And Barry would say to me, there are cracks that are forming in Mabel, and we need to see the cracks building and building and building over the course of the episode. So when she gets to that point, the cracks just kind of, they just
Yeah.
they just pop. And I think there's something about scrubbing the blood of your best friend and these two children off the floor immediately after she's been carried out and Moses has been punished. Like, it's just, there's no respite. There's no time to grieve. There's no compassion for that loss. It's just, okay, cool, this is your job. You now have to clear this up. When anyone could have cleaned it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Mabel is holding so much tension by being that maternal figure, that as I said, she's suffering under it too, and there's got to be moments where that tension gives.
Mhm.
Even if it's for a split second, even if it's for 2 minutes, or however long that walk is that she does into the swamp. it's enough to be the difference between one outcome and the other. So yeah, it's just, we wanted to try and humanize that moment as much as possible. Yes. And give it as much complexity as we could.
And at one point she does turn around, but on her way back through the swamp, the same one that Cora passes through later on, she is bitten by a cottonmouth snake and she dies. How was it shooting those scenes in the swamp in the Georgia heat? And how did you prepare for those scenes?
Oh man, that swamp and that heat, woo! It was hot as well that year. It was hot. It was like, I mean, I don't know what it was in Fahrenheit, but in Celsius it was like 30 something. It was hot.
No.
And dense heat as well. That southern heat in the US is no joke. You know, the swamp was intense, man, because even though we shot it in the daytime, you can't see anything in that water. The water is black, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's also covered in this algae that kind of has a life of its own, and sort of whenever you step and then take your foot out, the algae just covers the hole where your foot was. It's like it's super creepy. It's like it's alive. I mean, it is in a sense, if you think about all the things living in there. Mm-hmm. So I think just that alone, and then factoring in you know, that people did this for real, probably barefoot in the night, you know, under the fear of being pursued, all of those layers. Again, I just kind of got everything from the environment and from understanding what had preceded in the text. It was a challenging day. It was hot, and that we had snake wranglers, you know, like around, because we were told that snakes and alligators like to frequent those swamps, right? So I think all of that, you know, the real fear. I mean, obviously we were safe. The team made sure that we were 100% safe, but that underneath it all was enough in itself to just get that real sense of sort of shell shock. But I think, yeah, more importantly, with regards to the story, you know, I would argue that when you see Mabel wake up, that is exactly what happens. She wakes up, you know, when the camera kind of comes back to her. I can't even imagine that level of trauma and what that would do to your body and mind, and how people were still able to be like lucid and functioning, you know. And so there must have been moments where everything just shuts down. So yeah, that's kind of what I was holding in my head at the time. But yeah, it was intense, man. Woo! It was intense. And there were some times where like things looked like snakes as well. So like would look like a snake, you'd be like, oh, yeah, okay.
Oh God. Oh God, but the scene certainly turned out incredibly well. But ultimately, how meaningful was it to you to lend a voice to Mabel's story, one which she herself, like countless other slaves, did not get to tell in its entirety? Only we, the viewers, get to actually witness what actually happened to her, and that she, in fact, did not abandon Cora, but fully intended to return to her. So what did it mean to you to lend that voice to her story?
Yeah, it meant a lot, man. And I think with every character in this show, we're getting to see the stories of enslaved people in their fullness, you know, or at least even if we're only seeing a snapshot of each of these people, we're getting so much more than just images of them being brutalized. We're really getting story, and through that story we're getting understanding, and we're getting, you know, empathy and compassion and historical context and education and all of these things. You know, I really do believe that this project is not just a sort of gratuitous display of the horrors of American slavery. It's so much more than that. And you know, we see that race-based oppression is by no means gone. You know, and of course we've seen it very viscerally in America, but around the world, you know, I've grown up in the UK, and there's race-based oppression here. And so as a Black person, I any opportunity that I get to tell stories about Black people, I think that do us a service, humanize us, that show the world more of us than they may have originally thought. I'm so happy to be a part of anything that's doing that.
Well, thank you so much for shedding light on this time, on this entire process, and on this show. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sheila. And to our viewers, make sure to go to goldderby.com to make your predictions. And before you go, click subscribe to watch all of our great content with top contenders. Thank you so much.
Thank you.